Welcome to Learning to Glow, a show about wellness, skin health, and self-development. I'm your host, Jess. I'm a mom, entrepreneur, and skincare expert. I'm so excited to share tips on how to achieve healthy skin and bring amazing guests in the field of health, fitness, aging gracefully, and personal growth. Let's explore all different ways we can take care of ourselves as women, both inside and out, to truly shine. So let's get glowing. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. This is our last episode of the year, and it is Christmas. So grateful for another year of getting to share on this podcast with you all, and I'm looking forward to a brand new year with all new episodes coming up. But first, today we have an amazing episode with Dara McKinley, who is a forgiveness teacher. This is such a great episode and a topic we have never explored on this show. Dara shares her story today. Her background is in spirituality and psychology, and yet she was faced with a difficult situation that none of her previous knowledge could improve. Feeling called to try forgiveness, she searched online for a forgiveness how-to, and she quickly discovered that there was so much about why one should forgive, but nothing about how. We talk about what forgiveness is in this episode, what it isn't, how it can unload a burden we carry when we learn how to let go, and some of the reasons we benefit from doing this work. Dara now guides participants beyond mainstream forgiveness, understandings, and into a practical spiritual process that heals and restores peace. And we talk about that in this episode. You can learn more about her at her website, and I will link everything in the show notes. I hope everyone enjoys this episode and the remaining days of 2024. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show today. We have Dara McKinley. How are you? Welcome. Thanks for being here today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm doing well.
I'm really happy we have gotten all of the technical difficulties out of our system, so we are ready to go. I'm so excited to have you on. You are a forgiveness teacher. And I can't wait to dive into what that is and what you do. But I was thinking maybe we could start with, if you could just introduce yourself, tell us about you, and maybe how you came to find this work on forgiveness.
Yeah, so I teach from a spiritual but not religious perspective. I teach a 6-week online course on forgiveness, and I definitely am like the unlikely forgiveness teacher. Like, I never could have predicted that I'd be sitting here talking to people about this in my later life. So I was, from my earliest memories, just a very spiritual little girl, and this kind of channeled into studying psychology and alternative spirituality. And I did this for about 2 decades when I suddenly encountered a relationship ending. It was a business relationship, and I'm happy to tell you more about it in a bit, but I just couldn't get over. And I had all these tools, for 2 decades of studying psychology and spirituality. So I swore I was going to get over it. And 3 years after it happened, after it ended, I still wasn't over it. And I started to suffer the symptoms of a mystery illness. So, definitely would never call myself psychic, but I'm very intuitive. And so I got so freaked out about this mystery illness because I had a 3-year-old and 6-year-old at the time. And I just fully catastrophized because none of the doctors could diagnose what was going on with me. And I just started freaking out. So I, kind of had a toe to toe with the universe, like, oh my God, like, I need you to guide me out of this. And whatever you tell me to do, I will do. It was definitely like just making deals. And the message I got back was forgive. And
wow,
like a lot of people, I did not like that message, and I did not want that to be the answer to my problem. So I tried to shrug it off, like, okay, I'll do anything you tell me to do but that. But the message was so strong that finally I said, okay, I accept this mission. I'm a person who can follow directions. Let me get online. This is 2012 when this happened. Let me get online. Let me Google how to forgive. Let me come up, someone's 5-step forgiveness process. Let me find wherever that is, and I'll follow the directions, and I'll give this my best shot. And I Googled how to forgive, and 99.99% of everything that came up was why a person should forgive. And the little bit that I could find about how said you just do it. So I was like, oh, wow. I was like, well, I can't just do it. Like, I need directions. And so, because I had these 2 decades behind me of studying psychology and spirituality, I even have a graduate degree in Buddhist psychology. I was like, okay, Dara, like, you can do this. You can, come up with a plan. And I came up with a plan and I followed it. And 3 weeks later, I felt better. And I had two thoughts I'll never forget. And the first one, and these two thoughts changed my life. The first one was, whoa, like, forgiveness is for real. Like, that worked. Like, I'm so impressed, and I was a geek for healing modalities. So I was really like, wow. And the second one was, and that wasn't pardoning. Why does everyone say forgiveness is pardoning? Not thinking anything of those two thoughts, I just kind of went forward with my life, but those two thoughts kind of threw up a lens for which I observed the world for the next few years. And, here I am today.
Oh, that's incredible. So this is a health and wellness podcast. And I know people personally in my life who have literally become sick because they're angry at someone, or, and maybe they wouldn't put two and two together. But as an outsider, you could see like this person's very angry. They're very mad at someone, and it's affecting their health. Just, I mean, it affects so much. And I want to talk about some of those things too. But you literally had a mystery illness, and you said that you felt better. Were you like, take us more down that at that time, like how
Okay,
long?
yes. So this
I'd
is
like to
very
hear more about
important.
that. Yeah.
So it almost seems like I was baiting you with that, but I'm going to be very transparent about how this all unfolded. So it actually did not resolve my mystery illness when I forgave. So
Okay.
it relieved me of this resentment that I had been
Mm.
carrying for 3 years. But this mystery illness kind of would be the culmination of a bunch of other things in my life. And so, what I like to say to people, because there is so much interest in doing emotional healing and how that affects the body, and that's just such a very important theme that's finally having its day, is that forgiveness is not going to take you away from your life's curriculum, right? Forgiveness is going to lighten your load and kind of give you the skills to traverse your life's curriculum, right? So it was almost like because this health issue was the beginning of me kind of heading into a stormy sea. And it was like forgiveness gave me a boat to like
Mm.
sail through. And had I not had and it gave me supplies and it gave me a life jacket. I was like, okay, like I can get through this right now. And with that said, I have had on the other side of it, I have had mystery illnesses, because basically since 2012 I've just been forgiving, because I've just been fascinated by it, and I just want to see, like, can I forgive this, and does it work with this? And I have had mystery pains in my body that I have been able to use forgiveness to resolve. So it definitely 100% does affect the body, and I don't want to deter somebody who is struggling with illness, because the mind body connection is for real. And
Yes.
the more emotional work you do, the better your outcome is going to be. And there's scientific research about that. Like, that's just the truth. But I also don't want to give people like, oh, I can resolve my cancer, and I do think that life gives us an up and down curriculum that we all just need to surf, or whatever word you want to use, as skillfully as we can.
That's beautiful how you described forgiveness as being your boat and helpful with your supplies. I love that. That's so beautiful. So maybe you could tell us what you would define, like, what is forgiveness? How do you define it? How do you describe it?
Right. So the mainstream definitions of forgiveness are pardoning, ceasing anger, having compassion, and letting go.
Hmm.
And that night when I took on the mission, like, okay, let me figure this out. My first question to myself was, okay, I've been having this resentful narrative in my head for 3 years. What is the opposite of having this resentful narrative in my head? I asked myself that question. And for me, the answer was, oh, I would actually bless this situation with the highest love. So a lot of people have, I ask people the question, like, what is the opposite of a resentful narrative? And it's so interesting, like the things that come at me. But that was my answer to the question that night. So that was my first step. So forgiveness, I define forgiveness as a spiritual process that heals. And this spiritual process has two very important skills. And the first one is that it's one's ability to access and apply unconditional love in a practical way, not in some conceptual way, not in some, like there's just a lot of cerebral, I don't even, it's just not, it just doesn't land. There's a lot in everybody's brain about unconditional love, but like it needs to be an embodied experience that is applied in a visceral way. And the second one is your ability to identify what needs it.
So, go ahead.
No, that's it.
That was it. Okay,
That's
good.
my
I don't want to.
definition.
Okay,
That's
good.
my definition.
Okay,
It's
perfect.
a spiritual process that heals. It has two parts: the ability to apply unconditional love and the ability to identify what needs it.
Okay. So if the next question is like,
Yeah.
say you're in that state where you're like, I just can't let this go. I'm so mad. I'm so angry. I'm so resentful. All the things. I cannot forgive this person or this action or whatever. Where do you start with that? Because it's hard to, I would imagine, if you have such anger or resentment towards somebody, to go, I'm just going to love them. Because I think that, like, how is that bridge? Like, how do you get
Okay.
from one to
So
the
this
other?
great question. Excellent question. And this one, this pivot, this is a very big pivot. It's not your ability to unconditionally love. It's your ability to access unconditional love.
Mm.
And so unconditional love is, I have some very, clear opinions about it. Unconditional love is a spiritual love, and it's not of this world, but it's in this world. And it comes through us and operates for us. And so it's like a lot of people say that we are this love, and that's actually true, but I don't think that's actually useful to
Mm. Yeah.
to so we want to yield results, right? And so I feel like the perspective that yields results is that it's actually a spiritual force that we can access and apply. It's a medicine
Mm.
that we have access to. And so some of the obvious places that it's working through us is, well, through spiritual connection. That's how I have always felt it. Like I was truly, as a little girl, I had this felt sense of unconditional love. It didn't mean that I was an unconditionally loving person. I just always felt it right there. Family is another huge place that this love flows through. Nature, another huge place that this love flows through. Art, when someone's like in complete alignment with their passions, they feel like a force and it's unconditional and it's propelling them forward. So I know not everybody feels it spiritually like I do. And so one of the things I teach in the course is to help people like identify where it's flowing through in their lives, and then once they can see that, realizing like that is a medicine
Mm.
right there, a natural medicine that you can use in healing ways.
I want to talk about more of like what a forgiveness teacher is and like what you do with your clients. But what if this is an anger at yourself? Like, what if, talk to us about like, what does it look like for self forgiveness? Because I know a lot of people struggle with that. They've done things in their life that they just are like, okay, I can never forgive myself for this.
Right.
And why it's so important too.
Right. So our logical minds so forgiveness is a function of the right hemisphere of the brain. It's not it's logic is not that good. I'll be blunt. Logic sucks at forgiveness. It's not, that's not what, logic is in charge of other things. When it comes to forgiveness, it's the right hemisphere of the brain. It's not the left hemisphere of the brain. And the right hemisphere of the brain is pretty undeveloped in Western culture. So, no matter what it is that you want to forgive, yourself, an illness, an organization, it doesn't matter what it is. It just needs to be the thing that's bothering you the most, is what I always tell people to begin with. If it's bothering you, that's asking for attention. And forgiveness, I describe forgiveness as a healing modality. So there are a lot of healing modalities that could resolve things, and forgiveness is one of them. I think it's a useful one because it's something that you can just carry in your back pocket as opposed to having to see a clinician, even though I'm for whatever works and I'm all about like seeing clinicians. But back to your question. So it's your ability to access unconditional love. And unconditional love really is unconditional. It has zero ability to withhold itself from whatever it's in its path, just like the sun, just like water, like whatever it's in its path, unconditional love is going to meet it unconditionally. It's just what it does. So if you have something that you want to forgive about yourself, it's about learning to put this aspect of yourself in the path of unconditional love.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the right hemisphere of the brain that has the skills to do that.
So if you are like, there are people who are like maybe stubborn about this. They're like, I'm not going to, they're holding on to something that is causing them pain and everything because they won't do this forgiveness work or they don't know about it. What are some of the things, and we talked a little bit about this, but what can happen to that person? Like, I mean, there's probably a lot of negative impacts. I mean, as far as the way they're feeling, like we talked about, it can express in like physical ways and make you not feel well. But just in general, and like even emotionally, what do you see with people who are having trouble letting go or forgiving?
Well, I think that's the vast majority of people, and we
Yeah.
kind of see it. We're seeing that play out, left and right. People, someone who's carrying an emotional burden, it's pretty obvious. I guess to people like you and I, it's obvious. Like I have the sense that you're very empathic, and I'm very empathic also. And so, like when we walk into a room of people carrying emotional burdens, like we see it very, very quickly and clearly. So and emotional burdens then create negative narratives,
Mm.
and negative narratives create negative outcomes. So there's a lot of benefits to why someone would, want to step onto the healing path. But, however, it's like if someone, I think about my father a lot, he passed away, and he passed away of cancer, and he had a very cynical, had a very difficult childhood and had a very cynical view of the world. And, I literally grew up hearing life's a bitch and then you die. Like that's how cynical he was. And I think about him and how had he known, and he grew up with the narrative that forgiveness was one's ability to love unconditionally and pardon, which to him made no sense whatsoever. And so I always think to myself, like, had he known that forgiveness was, because for especially for men, that's like, it feels like you're losing. It feels
Yeah.
like your, forgiveness is for suckers. Like, it's because he was a very, boomer, macho kind of guy. So like to him, like the whole idea of forgiveness was like, no way, like, would I ever do that? And I just, I wonder today, like if you could hear, and, I'm very spiritual, so I know he hears me. But if he was present today and we could have a conversation, where I could say, hey, it's not pardoning.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's your spiritual capacity, and it's you wanting to like get over it and uh, be sending positive energy out into the world instead of negative energy out into the world. If you want to do that, if you want to do that for your family, if you want to do that for maybe, for 100 reasons, I often think like how he would have reacted to that.
I feel like I keep thinking of that saying where it's like when you, and I don't think this has to do with forgiveness, but when you are like wanting something bad for someone else, it's like you're drinking the poison thinking that it's going to affect them. I really butchered that saying, by the way. You know that what I'm talking about?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's like I keep thinking of that because it's like people I think view it as, well, I'm letting them off the hook where and by forgiving them, but in reality it's like you're the one in pain. You're the one suffering a lot of the time and hanging on to something that is upsetting to you and it's making you suffer.
Right. And having like a vindictive outlook, like doesn't doesn't do anything. And I actually also think that like forgiveness does release like divine justice.
Mm.
Like, I think there's like, listen, I am prone to a vindictive outlook. That's why this is like people like, oh, you're so like holy and spiritual and peaceful. I'm like, no, no, no. Like, I have very strong emotions. I can have vindictive thoughts. Like, I can be petty, like all of it. Like, that's why I do what I do, because I
Right.
observe this happening in me. And, we all love justice, because justice, what is justice? Justice is balance. We
Mm.
want things to come into balance. And I think it's like nothing cooler than actually doing nothing and watching justice like do its thing. And I almost feel like forgiveness like releases that process. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, it does. It
Mm-hmm.
totally does. I feel like there's a lot of things that it can be blocking emotionally when you're holding on to something so tight like that. When you're first starting to work with someone, if you have someone that's like that is just like, I can't get past this, like whatever it might be, where do you start? You start with teaching them about the unconditional love. But when you're working with someone as a teacher, where do you like practically start with them to and what if it's something super unforgivable? They'll say there's things that are unforgivable, but that's still affecting the person. Like, where do you start
Right.
with
And
them?
so I would say to them, you're right. I would say there are things that are unpardonable and there are
Yes.
things that are unexcusable. And you're right. There are
Yes.
things that are unpardonable and unexcusable. So this is, again, like this kind of what I'm calling an old school understanding of forgiveness that is deeply, deeply, deeply embedded in our culture, especially with our generation and the generations before us. Like, forgiveness is pardoning. So I'm like going up against this like huge understanding and definition right now and saying, no, it's actually something else. But forgiveness, when you understand it as the ability to access and apply unconditional love, actually nothing's unforgivable,
Mm.
because again, like unconditional love has zero capacity to withhold itself from whatever is in its path. But I agree, there are things that are, and so like forgiveness um, doesn't make you dumb. It's actually like the path of the wise bird, and it makes you like very intuitive.
Mhm.
There's a lot of secondary benefits to forgiveness besides, you release the emotional burden, but once, think about how hard it is to be intuitive when you're carrying such a huge emotional burden, right? So when an emotional burden gets released, like then your intuition circulates in a great way, that, there's again lots of secondary benefits. But we forgive. It's funny because I focus on how to forgive. I don't really focus on why to forgive, because I feel like everybody's talking about why. Like,
Yeah.
I'm really trying to focus on how. However, but it really is, it's like, do you want to walk through the world with a lighter load and as a wiser bird? And do you want, and it also, and do you want like high vibe relationships? Do you
Yeah.
want, so many people when they're on their deathbed reflect on their relationships. That's like the number one thing that's in their head, was I good in my relationships? And do you want to meet that moment that we're all going to meet and be like, I did the best I could with all my relationships? Or was I just like bitter, slugging around a negative narrative and draining, the air out of the room?
Mm. I
That's those are the people I encountered at
Yeah.
least.
Well,
Yeah.
I love like starting with, okay, this is what it means to forgive and this is what it means to pardon. Like having that separation in the language for people, I think because they put those two things together, to
Right.
really have that separation in language so that they can start
Right.
there is really important, because no, this isn't excusable, but everything can be forgivable and to your benefit, it
Right.
for you. But
Right.
I love that as a kind of first step to be like, okay, this is not what you might have been told it is, like the definition tells us it is. Maybe
Right.
you could talk to us more about the how too, because I would imagine with that, trying to get in touch with that unconditional love, is there and because of your spiritual background, I love that you have a degree in Buddhist psychology. That sounds so interesting. I'm psychology
Oh,
degree,
cool.
but I love the spiritual with the psychology. It's so beautiful. But I would like to know, thinking of those things, is it like a meditation practice that helps people start with, accessing that? Or are there other tools that you have for your clients that helps them access that, if especially if they are new to that? Because you have been doing this for so many years, but people coming to you may be like, I don't do any of that woo woo stuff, like, what are you talking about?
Right. So that's the first thing I teach. So
Okay.
the course is 6 sessions, and nothing's going to go anywhere until the participant has an embodied experience of unconditional love. So the first thing I do is get that fired up in the body. It's like, what does unconditional love feel like in the body? And I do that via a meditation that needs to be practiced multiple times during the first week. Um, and again, I also, sometimes people can't relate to that meditation really. Like some people, for me, it's all very spiritual, but I've been doing this long enough to be able to recognize that for some people, it's not spirituality where they feel it. So, but I know that people feel it through their families, through their love of their children, again, through nature, through their passions. So I also, at this point, encourage people to like start watching for when they feel their heart open
Mm.
in a really peaceful yes, where they feel a yes in their heart. And to start paying attention to that. And once they see it, it's like, okay, there it is. Now note what's happening in your body in that moment. So I get people to identify that. And once you have that, there's the medicine, right? Because that's that's what we need. And then the next sessions, you begin a daily practice. It's not a meditation, but it's a daily practice. And then the next sessions go into the deeper piece of it, which is about identifying exactly what needs it. And again, these are all body-based practices because, yeah, again, we're so trained to look outside of ourselves. So I teach people to, okay, wait a minute, let's see what's happening from the neck down. Because once you learn to look from the neck down, it's kind of all right there. It's all right there.
And we're so like we're so disconnected too, right? Like from our mind and our body. These are just that's a good life tool for everything, to be able
Right.
to connect your mind and your body. So tell us more about
Right.
that.
And we're anatomically designed to forgive.
Mm.
Truly, the right hemisphere of the brain was designed for this. Like as babies arriving on the planet, we came with the equipment to regenerate and repair from difficult times because that's what happens. We all go through difficult times, like the Buddha said, life is suffering, which I actually think is like way too general of a statement. but what he's pointing to is that huge disappointments and heartaches are going to happen, right? So how do you recover from this inevitable thing that's going to happen to all of us where we are hugely disappointed and our hearts get broken, right? So what, we got put here for that experience to happen so then we can just all get bitter and shrivel up and
Mm.
and die? No, we actually have the equipment within us. It just needs to be pointed out to us. Just like we had the ability to read and write, we just needed it to be honed. And again, unfortunately, it's the left hemisphere of the brain that gets honed in Western culture, so basic you could almost say that the right hemisphere of the brain is atrophied, for a lot of us. So it's really about building those muscles. And I almost look at my course as like a boot camp for the right hemisphere. Like I'm basically like having you exercise those right hemisphere capacities so that when you graduate the course, you have some muscle and you can be like, oh, wow, like I have this whole part of myself that I have access to now that's going to be incredibly useful as I go forward in life, and life's going to be awesome. Also, I don't want to sound like a downer about like, but it is a path of ups and downs, that's just what it is.
Yeah, I know. It's like not shocking when something like this happens to us. Like you said, like this that is literally the way life is designed, where we have our good times and we have the bad times, and it balances out. It goes back to like balance, right? We can't all be good, it
Mm-hmm.
can't all be bad. It could be all bad. I think I do see I've seen that.
Some people,
They live in there.
I have a spiritual teacher who refers to it as curriculum, right? Like that we all have a unique curriculum that we're following. And yeah, some people have a very, very intense curriculum. I observe that also.
Yeah.
And you can still forgive.
Yeah. And
As
that,
long as the brain is functioning, right? Like you can still forgive.
yeah, it's nice to know it's not a shock. It's almost like, we're going to expect our life to have these times and to have these tools to work with and to have that perspective just makes you, I feel like, recover from them quicker and then also learn from them instead of like we were talking about your father. It's like, okay, instead of coming out, who am I going to become in this process too, with the way that I'm looking at it and the way that I'm processing it? Because some of the hardest times in my life, I've said this on the podcast, have ended up helping me in my life so much. I've grown so much from them. I haven't stayed resentful about them. I've moved forward and I wouldn't want to do them again. But I'm happy
Mm-hmm.
that I came out the way I did and that I'm better
Mm-hmm.
for it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think when you have some of these tools and you can look at it like that, it enriches your life instead of just making it more negative. So I really love
I
that.
was just going to say, like, how can you take these very difficult times and, transformation is kind of becoming a cliche word, but can you take these very difficult times and transform them into the highest good,
Mhm.
right? Like that's kind of the challenge we're all up against.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you were able to do that with, some things that happened to you. And that's awesome. Like you and everyone in your world has benefited from that.
Yeah. My next question is for you and your
Yeah.
clients. Like, do you find that most of the people that are coming to you are really stuck on like a person or a situation, or just that it's more general, like I have a general issue with this philosophy of forgiveness. Like what's the most common?
No, most people who come to me have something they want to forgive.
Okay.
And that's what I came to notice. So in the years that followed my epiphany that night, when I was like, wow, this isn't pardoning. Why does everyone say it's pardoning? Over the next couple years, as you can tell, I love to have meaningful conversations with people. So over the next couple years, I had a lot of meaningful conversations with, people who are in my orbit. And I was like, whoa, everyone has something to forgive. like
Yeah.
I was like, wow. And because I, hang with people who identify as spiritual but not religious, and I specifically think like this demographic um, might be the one that struggles the most with this,
Mm.
because they're spiritual, they're aware, they have something they want to forgive. But they're very practical, and they don't want to believe something just because someone told them to believe it. I mean, this is how I identify. Like, I don't want to believe something because someone told me to believe it. So I started to see that, like, oh wow, almost everyone has something they need to forgive, and they want to forgive it, and they just don't have any practical path. So that was like another big piece that inspired me. What was your question?
No, you answered it. Like,
Okay,
were people going for like a specific issue or like circumstance or situation? Yeah.
Yeah. No, people, I mean, unless I'm not aware of someone who's entered my course because they generally just like want to know what forgiveness is. I feel
Mhm.
like most people come because they're like, wow, yeah, I really do want to forgive this. And she seems like she might know like how to do this. And I really want to be done with it. I have to like, it's people who are kind of in the second half of life seem more like eager, that are like, I've been, because they're aware of what they're carrying around. They're kind of maybe doing a life inventory.
Right.
They're kind of like, oh, I do need to release this thing, and I just have no clue how, because the whole pardoning, letting go, having compassion, and ceasing anger, like the promise of those things is that they just happen. You just have to decide to make any of them happen, and they just happen. And that once you do that, you feel inner peace. And I want to have a disclaimer right now. I have read a lot of things about people who have suffered atrocities and survived wars and really had like incredibly difficult things happen to them, that actually swear by pardoning, letting go, ceasing, by those definitions, that those definitions release them from what happened. And I believe these people. So I believe that these definitions are so popular, they have to be working for somebody.
Right.
So if someone tells me that like they use this to get over something, like I'm not arguing with that at all. I'm a whatever works person. I'm for the people that it doesn't work for. And I think there's, a lot of people that those definitions just don't land.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. I know people in my life that those definitions don't land, and having somebody to help navigate with this, I think is important because it doesn't serve you. And I think maybe a lot of the people that are maybe in their second half of life that are finding you realize that like this isn't serving me anymore. And maybe it never did, but like now I'm ready to do something about it because it can affect you in such a negative way. You're like we said, like it could affect how you're feeling physically and mentally, obviously. So is there anything else you want to share with us about forgiveness before you tell us all about where we can find you?
Like I said, you're designed for this. It's really a matter of just getting those muscles up and moving. You're right. Like I say, you're 100% right. Forgive anyway. Like I just want you to know, like whoever's listening right now, who's like, but I'm right. You are right.
Right.
And you can still be right on the other end of forgiveness. Forgiveness isn't going to make you wrong or short circuit your brain. Like you're going to have your wisdom on the other end of forgiveness. You're just not going to be carrying the emotional burden anymore. And so, yeah,
I feel like that's such good advice for even the silliest of things, like, right? I'm thinking of like how many husband and wives are bickering over something and they're like, I'm not going to forgive over this because I am right. I did the dishes 2 times this week and they did it, or whatever it might be. It's like that saying that says, do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? It's like, yes, you are right. Like that, it doesn't take away from it. But now you don't have to be like angry and walking around and mad because you're not hanging on to it so tight. So I love that. That's what I thought of. This could be work for more superficial things.
Right. For sure. Like, do you want to be right or do you want to be healthy? Right. Like,
right.
That's the question. Yeah.
I love that. So why don't you tell us where we can find you if somebody wants to work with you, where to go, and I'll make sure and link it all in the show notes as well.
Thank you. I offer the course 3 times a year, once in the fall, once in the winter, and once in the spring. And you go to howtoforgive.com, which how to forgive was what I typed in that fateful night in 2012.
I love that.
And the course is 6 weeks long. And that's
that is so I love that that's the name of your website. That's so beautiful what you typed in that one night. Well, wow. Well, this has been incredible. I think literally never talked about this on the podcast before, and it is such an impactful conversation, and it's such an important thing to think about because so many people are struggling with this. So thank you for sharing. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for having me, Jess, and for facilitating this conversation and being a beacon for health. Like, thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Please subscribe and review so we can reach more people who want to learn to glow alongside us. See you next time.